I know it's late. Oh, I know. But we're doing a stream anyway! I am not in control of life. Life has its ways of doing things. But we're doing it. Oh, okay. Continuing on with Heisuke's route, I have no idea where the fuck this story is taking us! But we're doing it. Heisuke and I set off for Aizu, hoping to give chase to Sanan-san, who by this point had revealed himself as an unlikely foe to our cause. Throughout our journey, we were met with rumors of mysterious, gruesome murders. Whether or not the victims included men or women, young or old, they all shared a single thread: the gratuitous disfigurement of the abandoned bodies. At one point, we encountered one of the murdered victims ourselves, witnessing a body punctured by stab wounds and decomposed beyond recognition. Our worst fears had been realized. It seemed, and I shuddered to think how many of these poor, innocent people were forced to drink Sanan-san's blood. We were left to wonder, why had he set off on this malicious quest? Just what had he hoped to achieve? This fairy kingdom, as he described, established in the secluded northern part of the country, was all of it worth the bloodshed? After weeks of following Sanan-san's river of blood, Heisuke and I found ourselves at Aizu. Unfortunately, we were greeted with somber news. The Shinsengumi's campaign in Aizu proved fruitless. Their forces were depleted, relenting to the indomitable will of the Imperial Army, who'd taken Shirakawa Castle. So we made it all the way to Aizu. Window made a noise. The Aizu domain was ruled by Katamori Matsudaria, the Kyoto military commissioner, and I keep hearing things. Who's responsible? I see. Okay. He and the rest of the Aizu had faithfully served as allies of the Shinsengumi, stretching back to their early years in Kyo. The Aizu offered us a place of safe refuge. Bleh. And it was within their cozy halls that Heisuke and I were reunited with familiar faces.
お前ら元気そうで何よりだな。途中で死んじまってるんじゃねえかってヒヤヒヤしてたんだぜ。
何言ってんだよ土方さん。羅刹の俺がそう簡単に死ぬはずねえだろ。はじめくんも島田くんも無事だったんだな。よかった。
あんたもな。
いや、お二人とも元気そうで本当に良かったです。前途洋々とはいきませんが、こういう時こそ希望を捨てずに頑張りましょう。
Everyone's enthusiasm to our arrival was a sight to behold. It was truly heartwarming. It was a truly heartwarming feeling, but Hijikata-san, I don't mean to change the subject, but on our travels, I came across a tile block that read, well, it mentioned that Kondo-san had... The words struggled to form in my mouth, and without wanting to continue, I gulped nervously. Hijikata-san, however, already seemed cued into the subject I wanted to address. His eyes thinned in melancholy.
ああ、助けられなかった。あちこち走り回って幕府のお偉いさん方に頼み込んだんだがな。
And so Hijikata confirmed what I'd hoped was simply a terrible rumor. On May 20th, Kondo-san was sentenced to death by way of decapitation upon the Itabashi execution grounds, and the demoralizing end to our once beloved leader. Although he had insisted, or supposedly begged, them to let him commit seppuku, his request was denied. For Kondo-san, who committed himself to a code of standards far exceeding others in his position, this was all but the destruction of his legacy. Soma and Nomura had originally embarked on a diplomatic mission to petition for Kondo-san's pardoning, but they have not been heard from since. All I could hope was that they too were safe.
土方さんはこれからどうするんだ？もともと近藤さんを大名にするために戦ってきたんだろう。それなのに
近藤さんに託されたものを今さら放り投げちまえるはずがねえだろう。失うものなんざもう他にねえしな。こうなったらとことん戦い続けてやるさ。
そうだよな。そうするしかねえよな。
I think our adventure is gonna end in Sendai, isn't it?
それでだな。お前らに見せておきてえものがあるんだが。
Hijikata-san let out a bitter sigh, pulling from his sleeve a thin rolled-up piece of parchment.
こいつは仙台藩から会津藩に送られてきた書状の写しだ。
I knew it! Hijikata-san unrolled it before giving it to Heisuke and me. Its contents were rather telling, if not worrisome.
仙台藩から周辺諸藩への親書。新政府に下ることを良しとせず。
Wait, so does this mean that the resistance has no desire to make peace? They aim to fight against the Imperial Army alongside the Shinsengumi until the end?
まあそうだな。仙台藩は会津を含む周辺の藩と奥羽越列藩同盟を結んでる。こいつはその同盟諸藩に当てて書かれたものだろう。
Hold on a second. Okay.
内容はわかるけど、どうしてこれを俺たちに？
最後のところを読んでみろ。
Okay, that's ominous. What does it say?
新政府を名乗る輩に抗戦すべし。
My eyes followed the words as Heisuke read them aloud, but as he made his way to the end, he froze up. What's the matter, Heisuke? The letter shook in Heisuke's trembling hands, rattling the parchment in an unsettling sound. Suddenly, he found it hard to enunciate, struggling to say the name of the letter's author.
仙台藩藩士三男圭介。
Okay. I mean, Sanan-san is from Sendai, so God, this makes sense. Our last stop is going to be Sendai. We're not going to make it to Ezo. It's going to be Sendai. What? It was Sanan-san who authored this letter? This stunning revelation knocked the wind out of both Heisuke and myself, who in this moment found no appropriate words that could convey our shock.
あの人がどうやって仙台藩に入り込んだのかはわからない。だがこうやって藩を動かすことができる立場にいるのは確かみてえだな。三男さんはもともと新選組総長だった人だ。俺たちの不始末は俺たちの手で肩をつけなきゃならない。
Well, right now my biggest priority is locating where Sen could be. So if that means somehow getting in touch with Sanan-san, that's what I must do.
手を貸してやりてえところだが、俺たちは合図の庇護を受けてる身だ。命令もねえのに勝手に動くわけにはいかねえ。新選組がこぞって仙台に入れば妙な憶測を招きかねねえからな。
As if we hadn't been deflated enough. Hijikata-san carried a limp with him as he moved about the room, an injury sustained while on the battlefield. Being immobilized by disability meant that Hijikata-san was forced to defer leadership on the front line to Saito-san, making their trip to Sendai all the more unlikely. Ah, so that means this is after Utsunomiya, so Hijikata did get an injury during that battle, alright. No luck ever seemed to find us.
なるほど。俺を呼んだ理由が分かったぜ。土方さん、俺に仙台へ行けってんだろ?
What? There was a strong sourness to Heisuke's loaded question, enough to make my heart pound.
三男さんも俺も本当ならとっくに死んでた人間だ。だから死人は死人、羅刹は羅刹同士で潰し合ってこいって言うんだよな。
I mean, that makes the most sense. Heisuke, no! I refused to believe that Hijikata-san was as cruel as Heisuke seemed to suggest. Desperately, I glanced at Hijikata-san, hoping he would refute Heisuke's implication without a shred of doubt. Yet again, my hopes were dashed.
さすが察しがいいな。お前の言う通りだ。その命に変えても三男さんを止めてこい。いいな。
Whoa! Hijikata. Ah, shit, he's got that look. Hijikata-san! I couldn't help but scream at him. How could Hijikata-san? He possessed no idea of what Heisuke's experienced, how he nearly killed himself, defending against Sanan-san and his never-ending army of ravenous furies. Nor had he seen Heisuke's expression, as I did, after he was forced into a vicious murdering spree, coated in a cascade of blood that threatened his sanity. If only Hijikata-san knew what I had known, Hijikata-san's order would have never been a question. That's not fair! It's not fair to put the burden of stopping Sanan-san upon Heisuke's shoulders alone! What? Do you want Heisuke to die? Huh? Do you? I found myself panting, nearly out of breath as I shouted at Hijikata-san before I felt Heisuke's gentle hand rest upon my shoulder.
やめろよ、千鶴。
But Heisuke!
いいんだ。
He shot me a stern glance, and suddenly my lips zipped shut. Heisuke nodded, then turned to Hijikata-san.
どのみち三男さんには借りがあるし、俺にしかできねえ役目だってんなら引き受けるしかねえだろ。
Heisuke, whose eyes normally glowed with a doe-eyed charm, was stoic. A far cry from the man I'd grown to admire.
そんじゃ俺支度してくるから。
His hand curtly lifted itself from my shoulder. Without his weight, I suddenly felt uncomfortable. Heisuke, wait!
やめろ、雪村。一人にしてやれ。
Hijikata-san interrupted me coldly, his voice dripping with derision. I spun on my heel to face him. Hijikata-san hadn't wanted Heisuke to die either. Or at least, I hope not.
新選組本体から人数を割くわけにはいかねえ。今動けるのは表向き死んだことになってるただ一人の羅刹、平助だけなんだ。
Is that it? Is that the only reason you're sending Heisuke off?
一人で三男さんをどうにかできそうなのはあいつぐらいだからな。
On his own. He's leaving for Sendai on his own. He has to deal with his affliction on his own, and now he must take down Sun on his own. Sun is the one who saved Heisuke's life during the Abano Koji incident.
他に方法があるんならそっちを取るもの。それができねえ以上仕方がねえ。
Hijikata-san, do you really think Heisuke has any chance against Sun? For a moment, Hijikata-san didn't respond. Surely even Hijikata-san was aware that he was potentially sending Heisuke off to an unceremonious death. Then, if Heisuke was going to be coerced into accepting a mission to his death, if it meant that, should I remain behind, I would never see him again, then I beg of you, allow me to join him.
お前を
I have a mission too, and that's to save Sen from Sun-san's clutches. Beyond that, I couldn't live with letting Heisuke set off on his path alone. Hijikata-san stared blankly into my eyes, scanning me with an intense gaze that made me shiver. Without blinking, though, I stared back in return. As our battle of wills continued, a deafening silence filled the room until Hijikata-san shut his eyes, seemingly beaten by my determination, before letting out a deep sigh.
もともとお前を体内に留め置いてたのは高堂さんの行方を探すためだ。今となっちゃお前をつなぎ止めておく理由もねえ。いや、もうずっと前からなかったのかもしれねえな。
So you're saying...
今まで悪かったな。お前は晴れて自由の身だ。
We're free from our shackles. After like 5 years. No, sorry, 4 years.
平助のやつがやけっぱちにならねえよう、うまく手綱を取ってやってくれ。
Oh, thank you so much, Hijikata-san. Really, you have no idea how much this means to me. A warm relief trickled throughout every inch of my body, and I bowed and prostrate out of instinct.
礼には及ばねえさ。お前も平助も死ぬんじゃねえぞ。
Once more, I bowed in front of Hijikata-san, touching my forehead to the ground out of respect. With that, Hijikata-san nodded, and I left the room. It was unlikely that I would ever cross paths with any of the Shinsengumi men again, but even so, I had no regrets. We still have a chapter after this, and I'm like, who are we meeting first? Are we going straight to Sendai and dealing with Sun, or is that the grand finale? At the very least, were I to join Heisuke on this journey, he wouldn't have to die alone. A sobering thought, but one that brought me a strange comfort. I bolted in the direction of Heisuke's room when... Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached round 4. Heisuke? I heard a scream and I rushed to slide his door open. There he was. He was tucked into a ball, leaning his back against the wall as he clawed at himself in desperation. Oh, fuck. when you get phone calls from work. Anyway, we're in round 4. So, say it with me. We give him blood. Hold on a second. This thing's scrolled wrong. Anyway, there was no time to waste. I pulled my kodachi from its scabbard on my hip and made a deep cut along the vein in my wrist. Heisuke, here, take my blood. Heisuke peeked at my bleeding wrist from the corner of his eye, quickly looking away in denial. Have we ever seen this sprite before? I don't think we've seen this sprite before, but... Huh. Please! You have to consume my blood. What are you going to do? Just suffer here?
そうだな。土方さんの命令があるもんな。ごめんな、千鶴。
Without any more resistance, Heisuke wrapped his supple lips around my freshly opened wound.
本当にごめん。
Please, there's no need to apologize. I'm fine. His tongue circled laps around the spots where blood had trickled, licking with intensity like a parched wolf drinking from a pool of water. His lengthy sips pinched my wrist, shooting a subtle pressure up the length of my arm, calming his breath. Honestly, in spite of the pain, I'd felt only relief. Relief that somehow I could soothe his agony. Whatever the circumstances were, being able to provide some form of comfort was the best feeling of all. After what felt like an eternity, Heisuke's seizure finally seemed to have calmed himself.
悪いな。いつも面倒かけちまって。だけど、こうやってお前に辛い思いをさせるのも、これが最後か。
Yeah, about that. Oh, about that. I love it when I predict the line. I've decided to embark to Sendai with you, Heisuke. And that didn't make him happy. Heisuke's jaw dropped.
一緒にってどうして？
What do you mean, why? Sen's with him too. I need to save her. More than that, there's no way I could let you go on that trip alone.
土方さんはなんて言ってたんだ？あの人がそんなこと許すわけねえだろ。
He already approved it. All he said was to look out for you, make sure you're safe. This caught Heisuke off guard, whose eyes widened at the thought of Hijikata-san approving anything. Heisuke's expression was darting in every which direction, like a cornered animal, but eventually...
ダメだ。一緒に連れて行くわけにはいかねえ。お前は土方さんたちと一緒にいてくれ。
Huh? This hadn't been the reaction I was expecting, and suddenly my heart sank into the pit of my stomach.
何度も言わせるなって。お前を連れて行くわけにはいかねえんだよ。この間三男さんと戦った時のことを覚えてるだろ。俺の力じゃあの人に勝てるかどうかわからねえんだ。だから。
Well, even more reason for me to watch out for you, right? Heisuke, if you keep using your fury powers, or become injured beyond what you can regenerate, then you might...
だからって、お前がついてきてどうなるって言うんだよ。
Dewa... It's true. On the battlefield, there's nothing I'd be able to offer you. But if we work alongside Kimigiku, then surely all of us could come up with a strategy against Sanan-san, right? If we just put our heads together, then there's no way we could lose. So... Whoa, hello, Kai? Thank you for following. And, welcome to the stage. I forgot my fucking intro. Coming up with a coherent thought to convince Heisuke proved difficult, and he refused to look me in the eye. For a moment, he kept his lips shut, nervously twiddling his fingers, before going into a murmur. Huh?
お前は無理かもしれねえけど、これから先も普通の人間として生きていけるんだろう。いつ灰になって消えちまうかわからねえ俺と違って。
I mean, that can be your intro. I just have welcome to the stage because I'm so used to saying that in all of my videos. Heisuke tightly gripped his chest, as if his hand were clutching his heart directly, and then averted his defeated gaze towards the ground. Can we use the proper words? This is a floor. This is a room. Please use the word floor and not ground. Heisuke. Whereas normally, even in the most arduous of circumstances, Heisuke's face was... cherubic? Cherubic. He seemed completely broken. He inhaled deeply, pausing for a quiet moment. Then he exhaled to calm his anxiety.
三男さんのことは俺が何とかする。勝ち目は薄いかもしれねえけど、三男さんを道連れにしてあの世に行くことぐらいならできるかもしれねえもんな。
What do you mean by take him with you?
そうだろ。この間三男さんだって言ってたじゃねえか。甘さを捨てねえ限り、俺は何百回戦っても勝てねえって。あの人には命を捨てる覚悟で立ち向かわねえといけねえんだ。
Why are you so willing to die, Heisuke? Trying to justify his reasoning to myself was a task, as I refused to accept or even entertain the idea of Heisuke dead at the end of this mission. He was so youthful, with so much left to live for. He had preserved his positivity in spite of being a fury, which was more than anyone could expect.
死ぬつもりも何も。俺もう死人みてえなもんじゃねえか。ふとした瞬間に血を飲みたくて狂いそうになっちまって。そのうち俺も血を得るため江戸の人たちを殺してた羅刹隊のやつらみてえになっちまうんだ。だからお前ももうこんな俺のことなんて忘れちまえよ。
Okay, this breaks my heart. Ow! Ah! How should I respond? Well, the guide says, "Are you serious?" Heisuke, are you serious?
しょうがねえだろ。俺だって本当は死にたくなんてねえけど。戦っても戦わなくてもどうせ近いうちに死んじまうんだぜ。たった一人で三男さんを止めてこいなんて言われちまって、俺があの時落ち水を飲んだのはこのためだったなんて思いたくねえけど、でもそれは正 しょうがねえことだって踏ん切りをつけられるんだ。だけどもしお前を守りきれずに死なせちまったら俺どうすればいいんだよ。
Although I'd wanted to tell him that I had readily accepted the idea that I may die as well, I quickly shut my mouth. How ignorant of me to disregard the value of my life when Heisuke was struggling to keep his own.
同情なら頼むからやめてくれよ。お前はどこにでも行けるじゃねえか。俺のそばにいる必要なんてねえだろ。化け物になっちまった俺のことなんてさっさと見放しちまってくれよ。
Hearing him express such hurtful sentiments made my heart heavy, and I refused to listen any longer. I swung my hand at his face, catching him by surprise. I was hot with emotion, but all my mind could focus on was how badly my hand throbbed after striking his cheek. I choked, tears swelling behind my eyelids, equal parts furious and devastated. Don't patronize me. I'm not pitying you. You're right, Heisuke. I'm not a fury. So as far as understanding where you're coming from goes, I have no frame of reference, but never once had I thought of you becoming a monster cross my mind. So if you think I'm just going to abandon you like that, then think again!
千鶴、お前
don't want to give up. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my cheeks. I don't want you to die, Heisuke. All I want is for us to find a way to live our lives together in peace. Is that too much to ask? Heisuke was silent for a moment. But eventually...
そんな方法があるんなら三男さんがとっくに見つけちまってたはずだろう。俺本人が諦めてんのにどうしようって言うんだよ。探しに行こうとしたらこの足が崩れちまうかもしれねえんだぞ。
Then I'll be right there to support you.
手を伸ばそうとした時この腕が灰になっちまうかもしれねえぞ。
Then my hands will be right there to grab you, Heisuke. This was no ploy to comfort or cheer him up. But if, by some divine miracle, my words got through to him, my duty would be done. Heisuke's precautious eyes were on the verge of tears. His eyelids trembled, and he was fighting them back from blubbering completely.
バカだよお前。
The phone really... be right back. Why the hell do I always get the phone calls at the best fucking part? Ugh. Anyway.
こんな状況でどうしてそんなに前向きでいられるんだ
Because look at us. You're standing right in front of me. Every time we find ourselves alone, no matter what, we can be honest with each other and communicate. How could I give that up? It would ruin me, just ruin me. If you died, Heisuke.
千鶴
Heisuke sighed in relief, grinning widely from ear to ear. It was the same endearing expression I'd become familiar with prior to his transformation.
俺お前ほど前向きじゃねえから羅刹になった人間を救う方法があるなんて信じられねえけどでもそう信じてるお前を信じることはできるかもしれねえ
With a delicate touch, Heisuke nudged the surface of my cheeks, wiping my flowing tears. And then...
俺お前のためにもう少しだけ生きてみるよ
Well, that was an abrupt end to that scene. Damn. Later that evening, Heisuke and I made our departure from Aizu. I need a drink. Water! We were careful to avoid detection, sneaking out quietly down the forested trail to approach the border between the Aizu and Sendai domains. There, we encounter the last person I had expected us to see. It's gonna be who I think it is. It's gonna be the bitch, maybe? Or it's Kimigiku. Or it's something else entirely.
まさかここで貴様らと相まみえることになるとはな。
I was right! It was the bitch!
風間どうしてここに
Kazuma's eyes thinned, pursing his lips nonchalantly as he turned to look in the direction of Sendai Castle.
目障りなまがい者どもが仙台藩の領内を往来していると聞いて足を向けてみたまで。
As in Furies? This must have been Sanansen's doing, no doubt. To think that they had raised enough commotion to alert Kazuma was worrying, given that he hadn't interfered with Fury business until it was serious. Just what was happening in Sendai? The numerous horrifying possibilities came to mind. I suddenly conjured the image of a smug Sanan-san, surrounded by a legion of obedient, bloodthirsty Furies.
もしや貴様らの仕業ではあるまい。ヤセの女鬼の弦があるから今まで貴様らに手出しをせずに置いてやった。もしまがい者を増やしているのであれば容赦はせんぞ。
バカ野郎違うよ早とちりも大概にしやがれ
Heisuke, calm down. Kazuma's not exactly receptive to threats, so watch yourself unless you want to get into a fight.
今何が起きているのかを聞かせろ。なぜ貴様らは新選組の連中と別行動をとっている？
Whether or not Kazuma could be trusted with his information was unclear to me, but since he had been regularly engaged in correspondence with Sen, I figured he didn't harbor any immediate intentions of doing us harm. Or at the very least, we shared a similar goal, to prevent Sana-san from spreading this terrible affliction to innocent people before it was too late. I took a deep breath. I'm going to take a chance. You see... And so I plainly recounted all that Heisuke and I discovered in our last encounter with Sanan-san. See, I think now we have him on our side for a little bit.
貴様らは一体何をしていたのだ、この役立たずめが。
God damn it. Never mind. The bitch is being a bitch.
油断してたんだよ。まさか三男さんが新選組を見限ってあんな真似をするなんて思わなかったし。
今仙台でまがいものを次々に増やしているのはその三男という男に間違いないのだ。
We have a strong reason to believe so.
それだけわかれば十分だ。
Without saying goodbye, Kazuma turned his back to us, walking in the direction of Sendai. Natte! Where are you going, Kazuma?
決まっている。まがいものの親玉を切り、手下連中も全員葬り去る。
That is a commitment. Suddenly, Heisuke perked up, and his face immediately scrunched in concern.
気づいたようだな。まがいものにしては上出来だ。
そりゃあな、これだけの殺気に気づかねえはずねえだろ。しかもこんなに血の匂いをプンプンさせてるってことは。
Kazuma and Heisuke reached for the katanas, reflexively, almost in unison. I was unaware of what they were talking about. Then,
ここに隠れてんだろ。見え見えなんだよ。
without waiting for an answer, Heisuke lunged towards the grass, swiping at the knoll in front of him.
まがいものごときの血で我が刀を汚すのは気が進まぬが、貴様らをこのまま生かしておくわけにはいくまい。仕方ある。
Heisuke and Kazuma butchered each of the Furies one after the other in cold blood.
こいつら多分三男さんが放った刺客だよな。
More than likely, yes.
だろうな。仙台領に立ち入ろうとする者は全員殺せとでも命じられているのだろう。
What? Just then, one of the Furies stabbed earlier by Heisuke had stood back up, attempting to feign attack from behind. Heisuke! Watch out! Behind you! Heisuke turned to look over his shoulder, shifting his feet in anticipation of the attack, but the Fury was quicker to the draw, its red eyes thinning ominously. Just then, the crack of slashed wind cut through the air. Suddenly, the Fury halted in its tracks. Heisuke wasn't about to let this opportunity slip. The Fury's mouth gurgled with blood, then its body hit the floor with a dull thud.
新選組の皆さん方の剣の腕は重々承知しておりますが、勝って兜の尾を締めよという言葉もありますわ。くれぐれも油断なさらず。
この声は。
Kimi Giku! It's you!
ご無沙汰しております。千鶴さん、東堂さん。
When Heisuke and I originally left Edo, I'd sent a letter addressed to her through Matsumoto sensei, but few opportunities to get in contact with her arose following our departure.
仙台市中の状況を調べていたところ、羅刹たちがこちらへ向かうのを見かけたもので、もしやと思い追ってきたら、あなた方の姿をお見かけして、お二人ともご無事でよかったですわ。
I wanted to share in Kimigiku's elation that we were safe, but I worried about something more pressing. Just looking at her induced a crushing feeling of guilt. Kimigiku. I recounted this in greater detail in my letter, but Sen is...
存じております。ですが、あなた方だけの責任ではありませんわ。
However, her fate is not your responsibility. Thank you, localization team.
私が姫様のおそばを離れずにいれば、あんなことには。
What? No, Kimigiku.
お前一人が居合わせたところで何ができるわけでもあるまい。部をわきまえろ。
Damn. Kazuma delivered a biting critique, one that seemingly struck a nerve with Kimigiku, who gnawed on her lip.
おい風間、いくらなんでもその言い方はねえだろ。
お気遣いありがとうございます、東堂さん。ですが、彼の言う通りですわ。口惜しいですが、私の力ではあの三男という男が刺激する羅刹にはかないませんから。
Kimigiku.
貴様が知っている限りで構わぬ。仙台の状況を聞かせろ。
あの男、三男は藩主に取り入り、敵兵や罪人として処刑される予定だった者に己の血を与え、その者たちを羅刹に変えて紙幣としているようです。
Jesus Christ.
おそらく彼の手勢は新選組にいた頃の数倍、いえ、数十倍に膨れ上がっているかと。
And the four of us are supposed to deal with that. Oh, Jesus. Before disappearing, Sana-san left us with a vague threat, one I hadn't put too much belief in. His goal was to head north, forging the territory for a kingdom of furies backed by his formidable army. An unwieldy and ambitious claim, no doubt. But now, as palpable fear began to set, as Kimigiku's report described that his lofty task was within reach, what about Sun? All we know is that he had abducted her. Were you able to get any idea of where she could be?
姫様は今、仙台城に幽閉されているようです。
Prisons imprisoned in a castle, how classic.
お助けしようと思ったのですが、城は多くの羅刹に守られていて、近づくことすら叶いませんでした。
No.
姫様は数少ない純潔の女王に落ち水を飲まされたとはいえ、そう簡単に正気を失うとは思えませんが、体力と精神力がいつまで持つか。
急ぐに越したことはないというわけだな。
How nice of you to say we, Kazuma.
薄汚いまがいものの分際で気高き純潔の鬼をさらい羅刹とするとは。三男という男はよほど早死にしたいと見える。
私はもう一度城の様子を探ってきます。望みは薄いかもしれませんが、もしかすると隠し通路などを見つけられるかもしれませんから。
まとまって動くとまた羅刹どもに感づかれちまうかもしれねえな。どうする千鶴。
仙台は羅刹の町となっています。 もし向かうつもりでしたらくれぐれもご注意を。
ああ、分かってる。三男さんのことだから二重三重の罠を仕掛けてあるんだろうしな。
何か分かりましたらすぐにお知らせいたします。それではまた。
Kimiko nodded sternly, her voice bellowing with confidence. Then she leapt from the ground into a tree. She vanished into the bush, lost in the sea of branches and foliage covering the landscape. Kazuma shrugged his shoulders, walking on the verge of leaving with an air of pretension. Where are you off to, Kazuma? If we're going to scope out an alternate entrance to Sendai Castle, shouldn't we wait for Kimigiku to return before going ahead? Kazuma was expressionless, reacting as though a fly buzzed annoyingly around his ear, rather than to a question I had posed directly at him. He muttered coolly under his breath.
貴様らに一つ教えてやろう。あの三男という男を始末するつもりならば、2日後が後期だ。
Eh? Why do you say that?
2日後の夜、月が中天にかかる刻限、天霧がこの仙台の半境で騒動を起こす手はずになっている。まがい者どもがそちらに気を取られている隙をつけば、城に忍び込むのも容易なはずだ。
Why are you being nice? I was astonished. Kazuma, of all people, was standing in front of us with advice, speaking not only directly, but in confidence with regards to Amagiri's plans.
それ、俺たちじゃなくて君菊さんに教えてやった方が良かったんじゃねえか。
早合点して勝手に姿を消したのはあの女鬼だ。
Didn't you just try to leave, damn it?
それに、俺は同じ鬼だからとて慣れ合うつもりなどない。利用できるものはせいぜい利用させてもらうがな。
After delivering his cryptic message, Kazuma wore a smug expression and melted like a wisp of smoke into the darkness.
相変わらず何考えてるかわからねえやつだな。
Well, for now, there's no reason for us to doubt Kazuma. Something tells me that he'd help us out, if given the opportunity.
気は許さねえ方がいいと思うぜ。今まであいつにされてきたことを忘れちまったわけじゃねえだろ。
Of course I haven't, but...
とりあえず、仙台の町にもう少し近づいてみるか。日が出てからだと動くのが辛くなっちまうからな。
Right. We nodded at one another before running off into the direction which Kazuma had just disappeared. We sprinted underneath flickers of moonlight. Soon the glow of dawn broke from the east.
だいぶ走ったよな。少し休んだ方がいいか。
Really? I still have a lot of energy in me.
無理すんなよ。ラセスの俺と違って、お前はそんな体力ないだろ。
Hey, it's not like that.
天霧が騒ぎを起こすのは2日後の夜って言ってただろ。少し休んだって手遅れにはならねえさ。きっとな。
Well, in that case, then sure. I can rest for a bit.
眠かったら寝ちまってもいいぜ。俺が見張りしてるから。
I'm fine. I'm not tired at all. Thank you, Hesuke. I sat beneath the trunk of a large tree, nestling into a spot beside its root against which I leaned my back. To be honest, My calves and knees were throbbing. In hindsight, it was relatively short-sighted. For whatever reason, we'd taken off, throwing one leg after the other at a frantic pace along the rugged hilly terrain. ねえ、平介?
なんだ?
Do you, feel confident right now? Confident enough to defeat Sun-on-Sun? Heisuke's expression froze. Ever since our last encounter with Sun-on-Sun, Heisuke had assumed a newfound resolve, but tackling fear head-on was a continuous battle. Heisuke sighed and forced a smile, lamenting at a truth that was likely frightening so hard to suppress. That he was likely fighting so hard to suppress. Ugh.
平気なふりをしてても、お前には見抜かれちまうんだな。
He squinted timidly, then shut his eyes. The cool morning breeze hummed softly in our ears. Heisuke took in a deep breath, exhaling calmly.
本当に三男さんを切れるのかって言われたら、正直言ってわからねえ。だって俺、あの人がまだちゃんと新選組の総長をやってた頃のことを知ってるもんな。でもさ、思うんだ。人の縁とか巡り合わせってやつが本当にあるのかわからねえけど、あの人を止めるのはやっぱり俺の役目なんじゃねえかって。
What do you mean?
もし俺が伊藤さんを新選組に誘ったりしなきゃ、三男さんは羅刹にならなかったかもしれねえだろ。
Heisuke, that... I'd wanted to insist and tell him that those events weren't connected, that it wasn't his fault, but... He hushed me with his smile, communicating to me in a non-verbal way that I needed to relax.
いいんだ。確かに俺一人のせいじゃなかったかもしれねえけど、大きい原因の一つになったのは間違いねえと思うし、良かれと思ってしたことがどんどん悪い方向に行っちまうこともあるんだよな。覚悟はまだ決まってねえけど、あの人ともう一度会う時までに自分の頭できちんと考えて答えを出すつもりだ。他人に出してもらった答えに安易に飛びついたらまたろくな結末にならねえだろうしな。
Heisuke showed a surprising amount of patience and maturity in his answer, giving me the impression that this question had occurred to him already. What I had come to respect, however, was that he was choosing to acknowledge his weaknesses, resolving to search within himself for a deeper answer. As his friend, I considered the best way to respond was to say, "Let me hold your hand." Offering an assuring sentiment was how I usually held Heisuke in his times of need, but this time, doing so felt like an easy way out, and instead I wanted to show him how I'd felt. Without another word, I stood up from my little nook beside the tree trunk and walked to Heisuke.
どうした?
I looked him in the eye and took a seat beside him. He stared at me quietly, and I tenderly held his hand. Heisuke's mouth was agape in confusion. I don't mean to spring this on you. I wanted to let you know I'm here, but I had a difficult time thinking of the best way to say it.
だからって
I'm sorry. Does this upset you? Grabbing his hand all of a sudden may have been an unwanted intrusion. I became hot with embarrassment, hastily trying to slip my fingers from his hand when...
いや、別に嫌じゃねえんだ。ただびっくりしただけで。
Heisuke promptly reached back for the hand that I so eagerly pulled.
ありがとな、千鶴。
How funny to think that hands, calloused from years of arduous training, could be so gentle to the touch. After resting momentarily, Heisuke and I regathered ourselves and embarked up the trail to an elevated scenic cliff, from which all of Sendai could be seen. Sunlight sparkled amidst a clutter of clouds. How's your body feeling, Heisuke?
これくらいなら平気だよ。心配してくれてありがとな。
I see. Part of me suspected that Heisuke was only telling me so in hopes that I wouldn't press him more. However, Heisuke genuinely seemed to be in positive spirits, and his complexion was healthy. He directed his gaze towards the city, which had been eerily quiet from our vantage point.
あれが仙台の町だろう。お天道様が登ってるのに、ずいぶんひっそりしてるよな。
As Heisuke noted, it was troubling to focus on how silent it felt from the city's outskirts, especially in the middle of broad daylight. Not a peep escaped the city, and through squinted eyes, I couldn't make out a single person walking anywhere near the city's interwoven streets. I wonder if people lock themselves up in their houses to hide from the Furies, or if... No, you don't think all of the people down there might have become...
お前はもう少し算術を学んだ方がよかろうな。いくらなんでもこの短い期間に町の人間すべてを羅刹に変えることなどできまい。
Kazuma!
随分とのんきな行軍だったな。てっきりおじけづいて逃げ出したものと思っていたぞ。
ここまで来て逃げるわけねえだろ。お前こそまだこんなところにいたのかよ。いつもあれだけでかい口叩いてるからとっくに羅刹を全滅させちまったんだと思ったのに。
天霧に命じて騒動を起こさせた隙に城に侵入すると言ったはずだ。もしやと思うが、貴様の頭は昨日した話すら覚えておられぬほど出来が悪いのか。
なんだとてめえ。
Heisuke, calm down! You too, Kazuma! Please, everyone, calm your tempers. This is no time for us to be bickering. All of us are here for the same reasons right now. At this point, we're practically allies.
仲間だと笑わせるな。貴様らごときが戦力になると思うのか。特にそちらの子犬。以前江戸で辻斬りを働くまがい者どもを切るのをためらっていたではないか。そんな甘い考えの持ち主にかつての同志を切ることなどできるのか。
それは。
Kazuma's comment was aimed at Heisuke where it hurt, rendering him silent for a moment.
確かにあの時は覚悟が決まってなかったけど、それでも三男さんは新選組総長で羅刹隊をまとめてた人だから、その始末をつけるのはきっと俺たちじゃなきゃいけねえんだ。
Kazuma stared intently at Heisuke for a brief moment, inspecting him with a look of scrutiny. Soon his expression relaxed.
時代錯誤な連中だ。気合だけで勝利できる相手ではあるまい。
Great.
そりゃ俺だって分かってるけど。
He's aware!
まあ貴様が持ち合わせているのは気合以外にないだろうからな。
なんだと、てめえこそ達者なのは剣の腕だけじゃねえか。
Heisuke, stop being so sensitive!
ああ、そうだな。こんな人望なさそうなやつの言葉を本気にする必要なんてどこにもねえもんな。
なんだと貴様。
Keeping them from arguing potentially... Oh god. Yeah, it is potentially, isn't it? Oh, fuck words. Keeping them from arguing potentially was becoming a draining task, but...
本当のことじゃねえか。お前みてえに性根が腐ったやつが他人に尊敬されるわけねえだろ。
ざれ言は大概にしておけ。一族のものでこの俺を敬わぬ者など一人とておらぬ。
本当か？あの天霧ってやつに危険な役目を押し付けて自分だけ楽してやがるじゃねえか。
Their banter was immature at best. They traded verbal blows with the wit and condor of children. Alright, I didn't expect this kind of banter to come between Heisuke and Kazuma. What the fuck? All I could do was watch, imagining the most fitting word to describe their irritating relationship. Was the word frenemy? It sounded so absurd as it came to mind, and yet it was so perfect. So perfect, my voice squeaked with laughter.
あ、おい、千鶴、何笑ってるんだよ。
Gomen, I really didn't mean to laugh. Both of you were becoming so frustrated trading insults back and forth that it looked so funny.
あってなどおらぬ。
All of it was so hilarious to me that I could no longer hold it in, and suddenly I burst into hearty laughter.
おい、何笑ってんだよ。
Heisuke eked a smile, forcing himself not to laugh.
意味がわからぬ。なぜ貴様まで一緒に笑っているのだ。
いや、俺にもわかんねえって。ただなんつうか、その。くそ、ダメだ。こらえきれねえ。
物を言う気が失せた。貴様はそのまま笑い死ぬがいい。
I can't stop laughing now either. Oh god, it's contagious. For so long, Kazuma was our most hated adversary. As the laughter of a demon clan, he'd opposed to Shinsengumi on numerous occasions, even going so far as to slaughter some of our closest allies. Yet here we were, exchanging jokes at one another's expense. Kazuma, who normally created obstacles for us at every conceivable turn, was now aiding us in our quest to defeat Sanan-san. Such a peculiar and unexpected position to be in.
とりあえず仙台に着いたわけだし、まずは城を目指すとするか。
Good, the laughing fit is over.
貴様のことなどどうでもいいが、その娘は死なせるなよ。貴重な女鬼だからな。
And he's back to normal.
うるせえよ。 死なせるわけねえじゃねえか。ほら行くぞ千鶴。こんな奴に構うのは時間がもったいねえ。
I skipped after Heisuke, and I couldn't help my lips from curling into a tight smile. At last, we had reached our destination, and it was time for us to confront Sanan-san once and for all. Despite my bitter instincts, I had hoped that we could somehow reach a non-violent resolution. A naive wish, but my one wish nonetheless. If there were no other options, if it truly came down to a battle of life or death, then battle we must. I embraced this hopeful sentiment, keeping my head pointed straight ahead of me as we descended down the mountain path. Oh! Alright, chapter 4 it is. Jesus. Alright. Instantly with the creepy music that I hate. Our arrival in Sendai was greeted with a foreboding silence, the sound of wind hissing into empty corners. The city was unusually calm, distinctly lacking any sign of townspeople or activity for miles. It was, by all normal accounts, a perfectly bright and unassuming afternoon. One could hear a pin drop in the distance, as the only other sound was the rattle of wind against the roads. This served to our advantage, allowing us to roam with no immediate fear of detection. It gave pause to think that the city was renowned for being the Tohoku region's most populated area. And yet, nightfall was doubtedly disconcerting, as the darkness only amplified how unsettling the dead silence was. No trace of life caught our attention, not a single voice nor a single light flickering in the lined arrangement of houses adjacent to the street. It disturbed me to think that the city owed its lifelessness to Sanan-san and his vile band of furies. Sure is quiet.
ああ、まさか町の人間が全員殺されちまったわけじゃねえだろうけど。
Sanan-san envisioned a fury kingdom, one that required the sacrifice of hundreds of innocent people. Were we seeing the fruits of his vision firsthand? We stumbled onto the main road, and the only sounds we heard were the distant clap of our echoing footsteps. If I hadn't known any better, I would have assumed that every single resident in this city had died. Just then, I felt a spooky presence behind me, as if an apparition brushed against the back of my knees. The feeling of being watched was palpable, and suddenly my feet felt rooted to the ground. It was a fear with which I had become all too familiar. Heisuke became privy on my nervous energy. Reflexively, he grabbed a hold of his sword.
千鶴、俺の後ろに隠れろ!
Heisuke screamed alarmed me, and I heard the metallic screech of his sword leaving its scabbard. Two pairs of voracious red eyes spotted us, glaring at us from across a dimly lit pathway. The fuck did you come from? There was nowhere to turn, and the Furies zealously reached for their swords before lunging at us.
やるわけねえだろ、バカが!
Heisuke swatted them back coolly, narrowly avoiding their aggressive approaches with well-timed footwork. After ducking to dodge an incoming strike, Heisuke whipped his sword around and sliced its sharp edge across the chest of his unguarded opponent. Heisuke, no! Entering a fury and opening its flesh will only attract more furies with the scent of its blood. Heisuke suddenly paused, stepping backwards. His eyes darted behind him, seeking an opportunity to run.
Chizuru! こっちだ!
Heisuke grabbed my wrist and whisked me away. Spilling blood was the surest way to draw in the unstoppable ire of the furies lurking within the shadows. Heisuke led me into a tight, narrow alleyway, and we shimmied to the other side, passing through what looked like an abandoned home in our escape. Heisuke and I hid quietly in areas such as these, desperately holding our breaths to avoid detection.
あいつら、行ったか?
I think so.
天霧が敵を引きつけるため騒ぎを起こすのは今日の夜ってことになってたはずだよな。
According to Kazuma, yes. I think we've still got some time before the moon reaches its zenith. Sendai Castle was some distance away, and I wanted to err on the side of caution. As I played the scenario out in my head... Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached round 5. Suddenly, Heisuke dropped to his knees, clutching madly at his abdomen in an abrupt outburst. Heisuke! Say this with me now. For the final time, for Heisuke's root, we give him blood. I reach for the kodachi on my hip. I brace myself, swiftly sliding the sharp blade against the surface of my skin to split my wrist open. Heisuke. No words were needed. By now, Heisuke had become intimately familiar with this process, and I stuck out my bloody wrist. He hurriedly put the open wound to his drooling mouth. I felt the sting of his eager tongue, softly tracing circles in varying speeds. Somehow, I'd become in sync with the rhythm of his breathing, how the pinching sensation of blood entering his mouth made me shiver from head to toe. I've already told you. There's no need to thank me. Strangely enough, this ritual had become a source of comfort. To think that I played some role in maintaining Heisuke's sanity was enough to satisfy me. In a way, the dull ache felt by the suckle of my wound was enticing, something I began to crave myself. My blood is yours to take, whenever you need it. As long as you never tire of it, it is yours, forever. Feeling any better? Well, your skin's a lot less pale than earlier, at least. Although his face still looked as though most of the color had left it. You have no idea how happy I am to see you okay. Earlier you were writhing in so much pain, I seriously began to think that you might not make it out of this one. Heisuke glanced at me pensively. What? It's not like that at all. Trust me, I didn't do anything special.
そんなことねって。俺は助けられてばっかりだよ。多分、羅刹になる前からずっとさ。
Heisuke plopped to sit on the floor beside me, crossing his arms over his knees as he spoke. Our shoulders nearly brushed together, which made my heart race slightly. We bask in this moment together quietly.
俺さ、ずっと考えてたんだ。人の血がなきゃ生きていけねえ化け物になってまで拾った命をどう使ってどんな風に果てるのか。
What? You're no monster. You're no monster, Heisuke. Before any of this, before the water of life, or even afterwards, you've always been Heisuke. So please, don't tear yourself down like that. I had committed myself to being frank with Heisuke. He scrunched his nose, offering no immediate response. Instead, he smiled peacefully.
お前ならきっとそう言ってくれるだろうと思ってたけどな。でも俺は化け物なんだよ。羅刹隊にいた大使たちやさっき戦った連中と全然変わらねえ。ただあいつらと違うところがたった一つだけある。
And what's that? Heisuke suddenly locked his eyes with mine. For the first time in a long while, I sensed no hint of doubt behind them, and they pierced me so intensely, it felt as though I'd been shot in the heart. What was Heisuke talking about? My heart began to race gradually, pounding inside my chest, when Heisuke whispered coolly to me.
俺のそばには千鶴、お前がいてくれるってことだ。
He flashed a wide, kind-hearted grin. His words replay endlessly in my head, bestowing a saturine? What warmth in my heart. Me? I'd suddenly become so overcome with feelings of affection that I struggled to believe this was real. It was as if I'd been dropped into a dream, almost needed to pinch myself in order to prove otherwise. So, you like having me around, Heisuke?
いや、すごく。
Do you need me?
当たり前だろ。羅刹が血を飲まなきゃ生きられねえのと同じで、俺は。
Heisuke rested his chin upon his hand, carefully thinking of what words to choose. I could practically feel his cool breath tickle my cheek when he spoke, and I took solace knowing that this moment mattered to him as much as it did to me. He looked down, clasping my hands tightly with his.
俺はもうお前がいねえと生きられねえんだ。
His hand trembled anxiously.
いつまで一緒にいられるかわからねえけど、こんな俺より未来がある他のやつのところに行く方がお前は幸せになれるかもしれねえけど、それでも俺はお前が必要だから。だからこの先も俺と一緒にいてくれ。
Ever since Heisuke drank the water of life. No, before that, Heisuke had been in constant conflict with negative thoughts festering inside of him. For so long, he had kept them buried underneath this veneer of well-meaning positivity. But the truth was, he was terrified of admitting that one day he would pass, leaving me to wander the remainder of my life without his company. Perhaps this is why he'd been so reluctant in sharing his feelings with me. Somehow, he had managed to conquer the negativity inside of him, and all of a sudden, I felt complete knowing he trusted me enough to confide in me. My name felt safe in his mouth. I'd finally heard what I had only dreamt of for years. With a strong resolution, I gripped his hand. I lost myself in the warmth, colorful sea of his gorgeous eyes, letting myself imagine that I was floating in a peaceful drift upon his irises. Heisuke's body tensed nervously in surprise, but he suddenly drew closer to my face. Words became unnecessary. When our lips met, I could feel it tingle all the way down the base of my spine. A sensation that eclipsed what mere words could convey. We accessed an unseen part of one another. Had anyone else in their entire life ever loved me as much as he did? Would my lips be able to reach his heart in the same way that his so effortlessly coaxed mine? I was the sky and he was the stars, his shining touch reaching every surface of my sun-kissed skin. Together, we were becoming one. His arms melted into the small of my back. I was inexplicably drawn to him, craving more and more of his touch with each passing moment. You can hold me closer. It's okay. I'm here. I'll always love you, Heisuke. He gazed at me on the verge of tears. We were uncertain when exactly, if at all, his mind would lose its touch with reality. For all we knew, it was tomorrow, and his body would crumble to ash like the burned tip of an incense candle. I savored his kiss, knowing it very well could have been our last ever. I became privy to the overriding fear of solitude that, for so long, had gripped Heisuke. But from this day forth, he no longer had to fear. My heart belonged to him, no matter what, and I vowed to myself that I would never leave him. The moment our lips finally parted, I held him close to my body, soaking in every bit of his warmth. I nestled into his neck, letting him know that he no longer needed to be afraid. Whatever the future had in store for us, I wanted to cherish this moment, freezing it in our mind's amber. After ensuring that we were safe to come out, Heisuke and I assumed our sneaking around Sendai. Besides the front gates of Sendai Castle, Heisuke and I crept behind bushes. I'm deciding, do I dare continue? It is 10 p.m. We'll stop at the first line that I have to scream. How about that? Our eyes focus on the Sendai warriors patrolling back and forth around the gated perimeter.
見張りは2人か。どうしたもんかな。
Let's rule out doing a straightforward charge. Might be a little bit too reckless.
いや、三男さんの性格を考えると、 裏道の守りをがっちり固めてそうな気がするんだよな。
Our eyes focus on the Sendai warriors patrolling back and forth around the gated perimeter.
どうしたもんかな。
Let's rule out doing a straightforward charge. Might be a little bit too reckless.
いや、三男さんの性格を考えると、 裏道の守りをがっちり固めてそうな気がするんだよな。 君菊さんはどうしてるんだろうな。隠し通路を探してくれるとか言ってたけど。
Both of us became startled by the sound of footsteps approaching from a short distance away. Oh no. Have we been caught by a fury? I shuffled my eyes back and forth, nervously searching for the source of the footsteps, and I nearly screamed.
来てくれたのですか、二人とも。待っていましたよ。
Girl, you should have screamed! Sanan-san!
もしかしたらおじけづいて逃げ出したのかと思っていたのですが、東堂君は私が思っていたよりも胆力があるようです。
Sanan-san was almost unrecognizable. He was clothed in a Western uniform, but there was something familiar about his expression, as if he had preserved an earlier part of himself, like Heisuke had said, that lured us into a sense of scrutiny, of security. Whoops. This familiarity, I soon realized, was part of his cunning, sadistic self, and my hair stood thinking that we had foolishly wandered into one of his traps.
しかしまさか雪村君をここに連れてくるとは思いませんでしたね。東堂君一人ならば万に一つぐらいは生き残れるかもしれないというのに、雪村君を死での旅路の道連れとするとはなかなか残酷なことをするものです。
こいつは俺のそばにいてもらわなきゃならない人なんでな。そんなことより三男さん、仙台城を自分のもの扱いなんて随分出世したみてえじゃねえか。
ほぼ私のものですよ。ここから新たな国づくりが始まるのです。
Kingdom. Sanan-san, is it truly your wish to create this fury kingdom? Sanan-san gestured towards Sendai Castle with his chin, which had been surrounded by a visible layer of what appeared to be a poisonous miasma. The same eerie sensation I felt sneaking through the deserted city of Sendai came flooding back to me. Had Sanan-san planned to surround the entirety of the country in this toxic fog? Was corrupting the whole of a town or a domain not enough for him? This chilling thought made my spine tingle.
で、三男さんがその国の王になるって？柄じゃねえと思うんだけどな。
本当に君は私のことをよくわかっているようですね。前にも言ったはずです。名手はあの羅刹の姫だと。
What? Sen would never agree to such a thing.
時間の問題ですよ。彼女には日々真の羅刹たる私の血を与えていますから。
You bastard.
そんなことはやめろって言っても聞かねえよな。
聞くと思いますか
Heisuke no longer intended to mince words, drawing his sword from its sheath with impunity.
そんじゃしょうがねえ。力ずくで止めるしかねえな。
The smug grin on Sana-san's face suddenly disappeared, and he turned to face the ground somberly.
東堂君、君のことは弟のように思っていましたよ。かつて同じ隊に属し、同じように落ち水を口にして羅刹となったというのに、なぜ私と君が進む道は行き違ってしまったのでしょうかね。
Sanan-san's eyes thinned silently, and he took a timid step forward. His movements reminded me of a snake, gradually slithering towards its weakened prey. I swear to God, if Sun and Sun had a pet, it's a fucking snake. The game agrees with me.
君とならば文字通り兄弟となれると思ったのに、なぜ変わってしまったのです。
The glow of Sun and Sun's red eyes unsettled me, staring into the depths of my soul with a sudden glare.
そこの娘、雪村君のせいですか？彼女が君を変え、くだらぬ情に振り回されて判断を誤る愚かな人の道へと戻してしまったのですか？
変わったのはあんたの方だよ、三男圭介。
Keisuke screamed bitterly at his old friend, kicking the floor the moment the words escaped his mouth. Sun and Sun left his head exposed, unfazed by Keisuke's reaction, even as the latter came barreling towards him with its sword in hand. Keisuke swung his sword downwards, only to be thwarted by the flick of Sun and Sun's wrist, deflecting the attack.
思ったよりは腕を上げてきましたね。あくまでも君にしてはです。
Sun and Sun took pleasure in taunting Keisuke. Just then, a flurry of voices in panic uproared from another side of the castle gate. From within the castle, I heard the chaotic scramble of furies racing to and fro.
また姫がダダをこねていますか。仕方がありません。
Sun and Sun's eyes and hair returned to their original color, and he calmly put distance between us.
逃げる気かよ、三男さん。
話は後で伺いますよ。今は君たちの応対より優先しなくてはならないことがあるもので。
Sun and Sun spun on his heel and turned around. With the kick of his foot, he leapt high into the air, jumping over the castle gates to safety. Someone else actually used his powers, thank fucking God.
一体何があったんだ。
I don't know, but Sun and Sun just mentioned the princess, didn't he? So that must mean... Hopefully it was indication that Sin was safe, or at the very least alive.
追いかけようぜ。今の三男さんはかなり危ねえ。このまま放っておいたら何をするかわからねえぞ。
I'm afraid you're right. Heisuke and I were hidden a short distance away from the castle gate, watching the wave of furies coming and going from its fortified interior. After what seemed like an eternity, all of the furies seemed to have left the castle and entered the city.
これって天霧が騒ぎを起こしたってことか。よし、今のうちに忍び込むぞ。
Perhaps Kazuma hadn't fed us false information, and this truly was our chance to enter the castle. This feeling of relief was fleeting, however. Sun and Sun possessed such an unbreakable calm, leaving me to wonder what he had up his sleeve. I could only imagine, despite how many furies had left the castle, how many still remained within. There was no telling at what point Heisuke could potentially exhaust all of his remaining lifespan, attempting to kill them in battle. Just then,
そこにいるのは誰だ。
Heisuke shifted his feet to get into an offensive stance, startled by a rustle from a nearby tree. To our surprise, it was...
驚かせてしまい申し訳ありません。お二人とも来てくださったのですね。
Kimiki-ku!
あんたがここにいるってことは、前に言ってた隠し通路が見つかったのか。
ええ、羅刹の目を盗んで様子を探るのは苦労しましたが。お二人ともこちらへどうぞ。
Kimihiko led us to a dried up well, which, upon closer inspection, turned out to be a full store. Although to the naked eye it was totally unassuming. At the base of the well, there was a narrow drainage chute that led to the side of the castle. Wow, you really could get into the castle from here, huh?
ここは戦国時代に建てられた城のようですから、敵に攻め込まれた時に備えて無数の抜け道があるようですね。
なんか財宝の一つでも隠してありそうな雰囲気だよな。
どこかにあるらしいですよ。
We can come back for treasure later. Wait, really?
この城を築いた伊達政宗公が気球のために遺産を隠したという話があります。
Masamune Date, a military commander during the Warring States period who established the Sendai domain and helped build Sendai Castle.
真偽は定かではありませんがね。
三男さんがそいつを見つけたら今以上に厄介なことになっちまうな。急がねえと。
Were Son and Son beyond this point? I took a deep gulp, and I continued crawling on my knees through the moist, narrow chute right behind Heisuke and Kimihiko. Navigating through the cramped space induced a bit of claustrophobia in me, but I held steadfast, pushing all the way through to the end of the castle entrance.
ここからは羅刹の領分です。くれぐれも油断なされませぬよう。
We'd entered a dark, confined passageway. The castle was enveloped in a thick, toxic fog, in some ways making it far more terrifying than the chute. A layer of film was stuck to my skin, a sensation that distinctly reminded me of blood. Heisuke, are you okay?
ああ、長いはしたくねえけど、そうも言ってられねえしな。そんなことより、あれ見ろよ。
Heisuke pointed to a pile of dismembered fury corpses, scattered as far as my eyes could see. Fingers, teeth, and bits of snapped bone were littered beneath our feet. But what caught my attention was the fact that these corpses seemed fresh.
誰の仕業だってこんなことする奴は一人しかいねえか。
We followed the trail of blood within the dimly lit catacombs. When we had made our way to the end of the trail, the mystery of who'd done it was solved. Who better for us to see then?
貴様らも来たのか。
Hey, bitch. Kazuma, you've made it.
無論だ。薄汚いまがい物が治める国の存在など許すわけにはいかぬ。
薄汚いって随分な言い方だな。俺も一応羅刹なんだけど。
薄汚いから薄汚いと言ったまでだ。
たく相変わらず嫌味なやつだな、お前。まあ別にお前に認められなくても痛くも痒くもねえけどさ。
あの男は、三男は一体どこに？
向こうだ。くれぐれも足手まといにはなる。
そりゃこっちのセリフだ。
Heisuke and Kazuma bickered like an old married couple. But now that the battle against Son and Son was fast approaching, I was so thankful that Kazuma was on our side for once. Kimihiko led the way, and together all four of us treaded further into the castle. We'd found a large door, and it took a few tries for us to pry it open, but when we did, darkness filled the elegant hall, so black that not even a dozen lanterns could illuminate the shadowy interior. Surprisingly, it was far darker than far darker here than within the catacombs, an unnatural curiosity. Continuing to walk down the hall, we saw them, Sen and Sun together. Upon closer inspection, Sen's body appeared to be unconscious, leaning slightly upon Sun's body. A thin trickle of blood drooled from her lips. To me, it looks just like the water of life, but I knew it to be worse. It was Sun's blood.
三男と言いましたね。すぐに姫から離れなさい。
どうやら君は口の利き方を知らないようですね。私はあなたの主の主にあたる存在なのですよ。もっと敬意を払ってもらわないと。
部をわきまえろ、まがい者が。気高き鬼が貴様などに屈するものか。
私はまがいものではありません。西洋の鬼と同じ、いえ、その先の高みにすら至った真の羅刹なのですよ。
He goes as far as to call himself a descendant. Oh god.
羅刹に真も偽もねえよ。俺たちにあるのは血を求めてさまよう呪われた体だけだ。
いいえ、ありますとも。とはいえ、真の羅刹となれるのは私のような選ばれし者だけですが。ですが、君たちにはその資格があるかもしれません。どうです？私と共にこの国を生まれ変わらせるつもりはありませんか？
おじである俺に羅刹になれだと？少子千万だな。貴様は虎に向かって猫になれというのか。
Kazuma seemed fed up with Sun's behavior, immediately reaching for the hilt of his sword. Sun averted his gaze coolly over to Heisuke.
一応聞いておきましょうか。東堂君、君はどうです？私と同じように落ち水がもたらす発作を幾度も乗り越え、その力を我が物とした君であれば、きっと私と同じ真の羅刹となることができると思うのですがね。
Heisuke is nothing like you, Sun.
何が違うのです？東堂君は血など飲まないなどというざれ言は結構ですよ。これまで何度も発作に耐え、そうして正気を保っているということは、東堂君も人の血を少なからず口にしたということでしょう。
俺は
Heisuke nervously looked towards me all of a sudden. Sun was right. Unless Heisuke had accepted his hunger for blood, his mind would slowly go insane, and the Heisuke we know would disintegrate beyond recognition. But
確かにあんたの言う通り、俺は血を飲んださ。だけど少なくとも人を殺してその血をすすったりはしてねえ。血を飲むとしたら生涯ただ一人だけの血で十分だよ。
Sun sighed in disappointment.
やはり君は甘さを捨てられませんでしたか。仕方ありませんね。ですが私はこれからも殺した者の血をすすって生き続けます。真の羅刹となれなかった君はここで果てなさい。
Sun reached his right arm over to grab his sword. Then, an intimidating aura suddenly radiated from his entire body, his hair changing to a brilliant white. His presence filled the room, paralyzing every inch of my body from terror. As I stood fixed to the ground, I started to tremble in place, my body soon covering itself in sweat. Was this a true fury like Sanan-san had said? Just then, Heisuke kicked at the floor. He twirled his blade in a circle, shining in the air in the shape of a crescent moon before striking. However,
腕を上げましたね、東堂君。確か君は北進一刀流目録の腕前でしたが、今の君なら免許改伝も難しくはなさそうです。
Hakushin Ito, a style of swordsmanship made popular in Edo during the early Bakumatsu period. Ito, Sanan, and Todo were students of this style.
ですが、所詮は人間の戦い方だ。
何？
Heisuke's eyes shot open with surprise. It wasn't Sana-san's sword that intercepted Heisuke's powerful blow, but rather, oh no. Sana-san blocked the attack with bare hands. Never mind, I thought it was worse. Heisuke's blade tore Sanan-san's arm asunder, slicing down from his fingertip to the end of his elbow, exposing a gory display of sinew and bone underneath his flesh. Sana-san's regenerative powers were at maximum, so intense that as his skin sealed the wound together, it trapped Heisuke's sword within Sana-san's forearm. Holy shit. Heisuke! I instinctively grabbed for my kodachi and charged at Sana-san with the full weight of my body.
邪魔ですよ、雪村君。
Sana-san sidestepped from me, sneaking a kick into my solar plexus and knocking me against the wall. There's that word again, solar plexus.
大丈夫か、チートル
？But even with Heisuke to occupy him, Sana-san's reflexes were heightened to a degree that made finding an opening to strike nearly impossible.
そうです。羅刹ならばこういった戦い方もできるのですよ、東堂君。人を凌駕する生き物に生まれ変わったというのに、君はその力を全く育てようとしなかった。それが君の敗因です。
Sana-san mercilessly kicked at Heisuke's body, the sword still lodged in his forearm. Heisuke! One of Sana-san's dull kicks had enough force to knock Heisuke back, involuntarily forcing him to yank his sword from out of Sana-san's arm and drop to the floor. Heisuke wiped his face, trying to muster enough strength to stand, but Sana-san stepped over him. As Sana-san's shadow loomed over Heisuke,
ならば貴様の敗因は鬼の俺を侮ったことか。
Sanan-san suddenly turned to look over his shoulder in the direction of Kazuma's barking voice. Kazuma stood toward the back of the hall, effortlessly carrying the fainted Sen in his arms.
なるほど。東堂君が私の注意を引きつけている隙に、君が姫を助け出すという算段でしたか。
そやつらと手を結んだ覚えはない。そのゴミが勝手におとりになったから利用させてもらったまでのことだ。
姫様、よくぞご無事で。
Kimikiko sprinted over to where Kazuma was holding Sen. However, Sana-san seemed completely unfazed, not panicking whatsoever to Kazuma's possession of Sen. I don't like this. No. Kazuma, no! Get away from Sen!
なんだと
Kazuma's eyes widened anxiously. Sen, who moments earlier looked limp in his arms, suddenly opened her eyes. And then... The sound of Kazuma's painful moan was immediately followed by Sen's malicious grin, her cheeks dripping with fresh blood. Kazuma! Kazuma collapsed to his knees, his eyes glowing with enmity toward the woman who deceived him. There stood Sen with white hair and a pair of radiant golden eyes. In her hand, she held an ornate dagger stained with a film of crimson along its blade.
姫様、まさか。
おやおや、鬼は羅刹よりも優れた生き物だったはずですが、その様子を見るとそうとも言い切れないようですね。お望みとあらば、君も羅刹に変えてあげましょうか、風間くん。城の門番ぐらいはさせてあげますよ。
The spot where he'd been stabbed was disconcertingly deep, and had targeted some of his vital organs. True, Kazuma may have been a demon, but his healing powers had their limits, seemingly unlike Sun-Sun's. Blood began to clot through Kazuma's clothing, and with his guard down, Sun-Sun found a chance to strike. Just then, a short blade was flung at Sun-Sun from behind him, but his reflexes allowed him to catch it in midair. The person who thrown the blade was...
勝ち誇るのはまだ早いんじゃねえか、三男さん。勝負ってのは最後の最後までわからねえんだからさ。千鶴、俺が三男さんと戦ってる間に千姫を。
Got it! I rushed over to Sen. Sen, are you okay? Do you recognize me? Sen suddenly looked up, stopping herself from lapping up the blood splattered on her palms. Her pupils undilated, regaining some sense of self.
姫様、しっかりしてください。
キック千鶴ちゃん
Sun no longer had a deranged look on her face, as she touched her cheeks in surprise.
どうなってるの？確か私、三男さんに。
Sun slowly reached her fingers to her temples, rubbing them while she grimaced in pain. Are you okay? Just sit tight. I sprinted to check on her when...
ダメ！近づかないで！
She halted me with her stern tone of voice.
今、近くに来られたら、私、あなた方を殺しかねないわ。
What should I do? Heisuke, someone who I adored, was battling for his life only feet away from me. But at the same time, Sun needed immediate medical attention. Before I could decide, Kimigiku walked past me.
下がっていてください。姫様のお相手は私がいたします。
Kimigiku? But what do you plan on doing with her?
決まっています。まがいものと変えられ、同族殺しという罪を犯させるくらいなら。
Oh no!
私がこの手でお命を絶ちます。 姫様の誇りを守るためにも。
What? No, you can't! Please, don't kill Sen. She's my friend. She's precious to me.
千鶴さん。
Maybe I was making a mistake that would prove costly should she attempt to kill me, but... I gulped, nervously staring at the bewildered Sen. Sen, meh.
千鶴ちゃん
Sen, don't give into the water of life. And don't let Kimigiku kill you. Please. Sen's golden eyes flickered, hovering between what looked like to be herself and her evil form.
私
Oh boy.
何をしているのです、千姫。その二人を早く殺しなさい。
Sun-on-Sun's words triggered Sen's frenzy, and suddenly her pupils dilated with fervor.
あ
She tightly gripped the hilt of the dagger, leaping to charge in my direction. She was coming right towards me. Just as I shut my eyes, I heard the sound of her dagger sinking into flesh. However, it wasn't my flesh that her dagger sank into.
キック
キミキがなぜ
どうしてはこちらのセリフです。姫様と同じで、あなたも随分と無茶をなさいますね。
Sticking out from Kimikiku's ribcage was Sen's dagger, blood oozing from the entrance wound. At first glance, the wound wasn't fatal. However, watching Sen mindlessly drive her dagger into her old friend's abdomen was worrisome. Kimikiku was steadfast, biting her tongue to refrain from crying out in pain, and she smiled timidly.
姫は多くの人に慕われておりますが、鬼の一族の長という身の上ですから。立場上、心を許せるものは決して多くありません。あなたのお生まれもあるかもしれませんが、鬼と知ってなお姫様のことを友人と呼んでくださったのはあなたが初めてです。
Kimikiku's body wavered, and she let out one pained groan before collapsing to the ground.
ごめんね大きく
The light of insanity left Sen's eyes, replaced by a mournful gaze upon her old guardian.
バカな。真の羅刹となった者が鬼ごときの呼びかけで正気に戻るなど。もしかすると先ほど風間や君肉の血を舐めていたせいか。
どうでもよかろう。貴様が誇っていた羅刹の血とやらが別の何かに敗れた。ただそれだけのことだ。
黙りなさい。真なる羅刹が破れるなどあってはならない。ならないのです。
Sananso's eyes burned with an intense rage, directing his hateful gaze towards Sen and me.
いいでしょう。もし君たちとの絆が千姫を正気に戻したというのなら、ここにいる者全員 彼女を思う者も慕う者も知る者も全て殺し、羅刹を増やすためだけに存在する姫に仕立て上げるだけです。仮に失敗したとしても、純潔の鬼の姫はもう一人いますからね、雪村君。
Sona-san was seething, crossing the threshold of insanity that meant no return for him. His eyes were fixed on me, and when he took a step towards me, Heisuke stood in front of me.
生きてる人間に手を出すなよ、三男さん。ここはやっぱりとっくに死んでる人間同士で決着つけようぜ。千鶴、下がっててくれ。
All right. Please be safe, Heisuke. I nodded, putting my full faith into him as I slowly backed myself against the wall in a secluded corner. From here, Heisuke's back had never looked taller, and he stood confidently in front of Son-san. Heisuke assumed his Seigan position, widening his stance. Seigan, an offensive sword stance categorized by the lowering of the knees and the pointing of one's blade towards their opponent. In the blink of an eye, Son-san and Heisuke lunged at one another. Heisuke attempted to sidestep Sanan, swinging his blade for Son-san's arm when...
遅いですね。疲れが出始めましたか。
はっ、これぐらいで疲れるはずねえだろ。あんたの方こそそろそろ寿命が尽きちまうんじゃねえのか。
ご冗談を。何のために私が人であることを捨てて血をすすり続けたと思っているのです。
Sana-san cocked his elbow back before stabbing out. The tip of his blade was driven into Heisuke's chest. Uh-oh. Heisuke!
以前言った通りではないですか。やはり君は何百回戦おうとこの私には勝てません。
Sana-san twisted his blade, digging it further into Heisuke's chest before turning to look at me.
どうしたんです、雪村君。恋慕う相手を殺されたというのに涙の一つも流さないのですか。
I stared resolutely back at him. I believe in Heisuke.
信じるも何も、彼が死ぬのは時間の問題ですよ。
I steeled myself to refrain from panicking. Heisuke wasn't the type of person to back down so easily, and he'd survived tougher than this. There was no way Sanan-san would kill him now.
人を操る術を持つこの私が言葉では君の心一つ動かせないとはね。まあいいでしょう。東堂君が寂しがるといけませんから、一緒にあの世へ送ってあげます。
Sana-san jiggled the hilt of his sword, which was still stuck in Heisuke's chest, to pull it out.
抜けない。
Sana-san grew agitated, staring back at Heisuke in shock. Before Sana-san had a chance to react, the tip of Heisuke's sword slid across the tatami mat, ripping it as he thrusted the blade upwards. It was aimed directly for Sana-san's heart. Sana-san lifted his left hand defensively, hoping to block Heisuke's faint attack, but he was too late. The blade in Heisuke's hand was jabbed directly into Sanan-san's heart, followed by the snap of his chest bone. Sanan-san spit up a mouthful of blood, his lips frothing. It dribbled down his chin, trickling into a wide spot on his chest, which by this time had been splattered by so much blood, his seemed indistinguishable.
見事でしたよ、東堂君。まさかこの私が先ほど君を仕留めようとした策で殺されるとはね。昔のあんただったらきっとこんな方法じゃ殺せなかったと思うぜ。それは買いかぶりというものですよ。私は弱い人間ですから。そうかな。最後の一撃だって止めようと思えば止められたんじゃねえのか。
Sanan-san let out a derisive laugh under his breath.
止められませんでしたよ。人だった頃のことを思い出したら左腕が動かなかったんです。
That's right. Sanan-san's left arm. While performing his rounds, Sanan-san suffered a debilitating injury to his arm that effectively ended his tenure as a warrior. It was this arm that convinced him to drink the water of life.
皮肉なものですね。新選組と近藤さんの名を世に出すため戦い続けてきたというのに、新選組の名を最も貶めたのはこの私ということになるのでしょうか。
俺もあんたも表向きはとっくに死んだことになってる人間だ。歴史に残るのはきっと頭が良くて穏やかで剣術がうまくて少し腹黒で誰よりも新選組を思ってた三男圭介の名前だけだよ。
Hearing Heisuke speak to him so encouragingly gave Sanan-san a sense of inner peace, resolving the war that had waged inside of him for too long.
そうですか。それならばいいのですね。先にあの世で待っていますよ。堂々君。
A gentle smile rested easily on Sanan-san's thin lips, just like how he looked when I first met him. He shut his eyes, calmly passing into the next life. Heisuke, are you alright?
ああ、結構深く刺されちまったから治るのにはもう少しかかりそうだけど。
Sit still. I'll take a look at it right away.
いや、いいって。俺ら説だから傷ならすぐに治っちまうし。
Let me clean the wounds at least, will you? Please? I wiped away the coagulated chunks of blood with a thin rag and water from my canteen. Man, did Heisuke always have to be so reckless? One of these days, it'd come back to bite him.
おい、千鶴、どうしたんだよ、泣いてんのか？
I'm not.
いや、どう見ても涙出てるじゃねえか。泣かないでくれって。
I'm not! In spite of my insistence, thick tears rolled down my face.
あ、悪かったよ、心配かけちまって。だけどさっきはしょうがなかったろ。
I know that, but still. Heisuke was smiling beside me, jovial as ever. Having him here safe beside me, trading jokes back and forth, was as good as it could ever be.
みんなとりあえずは無事みたいね。大丈夫？おきくん。
平気です。あともう少しすれば傷も塞がるでしょう。
How are you doing, Kazuma?
あれ式の怪我どうということはない。貴様らと一緒にするな。
こんな時までこの態度かよ。とどめを刺したくなっちまうな。
Oi, be nice. Without Kazuma, who knows what position we'd be in right now.
まあ、とりあえずこれで全部片付いたな。
It would seem so. Now that Sanansan's reign of terror was over, there was no more threat of a Fury Kingdom looming. Heisuke, what are you going to do next?
まあ、きっとなんとかなるさ。お前がそばにいてくれるんなら、三男さんみてえに狂っちまうこともねえだろうし。もし俺が狂ったら、誰かが退治してくれるって。そこにいる小悪の鬼とかがな。
そんな面倒な役目ができるか。他力本願も大概にしろ。
Kazuma turned his back to us, muttering coldly under his breath.
以前耳にしたことがある。雪村光道が落ち水の改良に用いたのは東国の鬼の里、雪村家の故郷の水だとな。
What?
陸奥の水には落ち水の毒を清める効能があるらしい。その水ならばすでに羅刹となったものの毒をも消せるかもしれんな。
Kazuma, did you know all that for our sake?
その薄汚いまがいものが都に出てくると目障りだからな。人も通わぬ山奥でつまらぬ一生を終えるがいい。
東堂さんを見逃してあげるんなら素直にそう言えばいいのに。
見逃したわけではない。血に狂えばいつでも殺しに来る。
Kazuma spat on the ground, turning to walk away from us and the castle.
あ、ちょっと待てよ、風間。
まだ何かあるのか。要件ならばさっさと言え。
お前最後までその態度かよ。まあいいや、一度しか言わねえからよく聞けよ。さっきの話教えてくれてありがとうよ。感謝する。
聞こえんな。もう一度言え。
Oh God.
嘘つけ。今絶対聞こえてただろ。二度と言わねえよ。
It seemed that not even fighting together for their lives could keep Kazuma and Heisuke from bickering. Watching the two of them exchange playful banter coaxed tears of joy from all of us. And afterwards...
千鶴さん、あなたはこれからどうなさるおつもりですか？風間が言っていた通り、雪村の里へ。
I think that's where we're off to next. Maybe I'll pay the Shinsengumi a visit first, though.
そう。じゃあ時々遊びに行くわね。鬼と羅刹が仲良く暮らしている里に。
Please feel free to come by whenever you'd like. You are always welcome. Following the Battle of Sendai, we traded our goodbyes, leaving behind the castle and all of its hurtful memories in our wake. (1868) August. Once we made our way back to the Shinsengumi from Sendai, Hijikata-san warmly welcomed Heisuke and me, although he'd never say it to our faces. Lines of worry stretched across his forehead, and judging by his enthusiasm to greet us, it seemed like he'd been waiting to hear what had become of us. As we recounted the events back to him, Hijikata-san was receptive, taking all of it in with a gentle smile.
平助、雪村、大義だった。辛い役目を負わせちまったな。
いや、あれはきっと俺がやらなきゃならねえことだったんだ。俺も一歩間違えば三男さんと同じ道を歩んでたかもしれねえから。
Then Heisuke glanced over at me. I didn't go mad thanks to you. Or at least that's what he said through his eyes. Following a pause, Hijikata-san's tone dropped low, his voice hovering barely above a murmur.
三男さんは最後どうだった？
Well, I think he reverted back to his original self as he edged closer to his death. He fondly recalled a memory, thinking back to the days when he was only human.
そうか。
Hijikata-san lowered his gaze to the floor, perhaps reflecting upon happier times he'd share with Sanan-san. What stuck out as poignant to me was Sanan-san's memory of the Shinsengumi's early days, thinking back on how loyally he served both Kondo-san and the group. The guilt and sorrow Hijikata-san must have felt for ordering the death of his longtime friend was unimaginable. However, there wasn't much time to linger on the past. For now, Heisuke and I had one last journey to make.
それでさ、土方さん、俺たちが別行動をとってた間、戦況はどうなってたんだ？
それがな。
According to Hijikata-san, they were on the losing end of a devastating war, which only seemed to worsen day by day. Though he could only rely on both Saito and Shimada to lead their troops, mounting offensive charges that worked successfully in their favor. Other divisions weren't so lucky. So what does that mean for the rest of you now?
戦ってるのは俺たちだけじゃねえからな。今は何とも言えねえ。
Although he would never admit it, it seemed like Hijikata-san was at the end of his rope, desperately searching for recruits to strengthen their numbers. Hijikata-san snuck a glance at Heisuke, and perhaps he was even considering asking him to join, even if Heisuke could have turned to ash on the battlefield. However, our minds had already been made up. Hijikata-san, I need to speak with you. You see...
待てよ、千鶴。その先を話すのは俺の役目だ。そうだろ。
Heisuke turned from looking at me to facing Hijikata-san, carrying a look of certainty in his eyes.
土方さん、今新選組を取り巻く状況がどれだけ厳しいのかは俺も分かってるつもりだ。だけどそれでも言わせてくれ。俺は新選組を抜ける。こいつと一緒に。
We'd expected Hijikata-san to throw a fit or roll his eyes and call us idiots, but instead, he sat quietly. Kondo-san, Okita, Yamazaki-san, Inoue, Harada, and Nagakura. In such a short span of time, Hijikata-san was forced to say goodbye to so many of his old friends.
新選組を抜けるか。刀を捨てるつもりか、平助。
ああ。俺はずっと戦い続けてきた。この国のために戦って死ぬのが 武士だって思ってたから。羅刹になってからはもっとそうだった。戦うこと自体が俺の生きる意味みてえな気さえしてたよ。俺は戦うために生き返ったんだ。戦うためだけに存在してるんだってさ。
Heisuke shut his eyes in reflection, quietly turning the events of the past few years over in his mind. He took a deep breath and opened his eyelids before turning to face me again.
でもこいつと一緒にいて分かったんだ。俺は人間じゃなくなったけど戦う以外にもできることはあるんだって。
そうか。そういうからには何か目的でもあるんだな、お前ら。
We're going to head for the village where I was born, the Yukimura village. Supposedly there may be a wellspring hidden within the mountains that could cure Heisuke's condition.
俺が生き延びる方法があるかもしれねえんなら全部試してみてんだ。今の俺は戦って死ぬんじゃなく生きたいんだ。こいつと一緒に。
Ichikata-san shut his eyes in contemplation, thinking quietly to himself as I twiddled my fingers. It was a lofty request, one that I anticipated was too nuanced to answer quickly. After a prolonged silence, Ichikata-san opened his eyelids again, turning to ask me a question.
雪村、お前もそれで納得してるのか?
Absolutely. I nodded firmly, staring back at Ichikata-san with confidence. I feel comfortable enough to say this now, but when I'd first encountered the Shinsengumi, all of you seemed so intimidating to me. But the more I came to spend time with each one of you, I began to understand. All of you laughed, cried, and fought together, weathering life's challenges as one unit. Before I knew it, the Shinsengumi had carved a very special place in my heart. But what I feel for Heisuke surpasses all of that. And because of how strongly these emotions run through me, I want to settle down with him. Together, we could search for a way to improve his health, no matter how long it takes.
俺も
Heisuke was going to expand upon what I had said, but Ichikata-san interjected almost immediately.
平助、雪村。さっきの報告に間違いがねえんなら、鬼どもがこの戦に関わることはねえんだな。
We believe so.
鬼は手を引いて、羅刹隊は滅んだか。じゃあこれ以上お前らがこの戦に関わる必要なんてねえよ。平助は油小路で死んだことになった。雪村に至っては元より大使でも何でもねえ。好きなようにどこへでも行っちまえ。
Ichikata-san wore a relaxed expression, speaking with a plain tone of voice. I suppose this was his send-off. On paper, it seemed impersonal, but for us, it meant so much more. Despite the imminent threat of war still hovering just beyond the horizon, Ichikata-san sat with us, sending us off warmly in his own reserved way. When Ichikata-san nodded with the go-ahead,
土方さん、今までありがとうございました。
ありがとう。 No other words captured how we felt as immediately. Wow. So this really is goodbye then, huh? It was becoming real, meaning that we would have to bid farewell to our entire lives thus far for whatever our journey would take us. For Heisuke, who had served the Shinsengumi for far longer than I did, I could only imagine what had been going through his mind at the time. Peeking from the corner of my eye, I took a glimpse at him, noticing that he had already been staring in my direction and our eyes locked together. What's the matter?
なあ、最後にもう一度だけ聞いときたくてさ。
Ask me what?
千鶴、お前後悔しないか？
It was a heavy question to which I wondered if I'd ever truly know the answer. But for now, of course I won't. Because the only priority I have is spending the rest of my life with you, Heisuke. Come what may, no matter what happens beyond this point, I could never regret this decision. I gave him my purest, widest smile. Deep in my heart, I knew that happiness without you isn't happiness at all.
そっか。まあ、そう答えてくれるとは思ってたんだけどさ。やっぱお前の口から聞きたくて。
I guess there are some things that mean more when they're said in person.
実は俺もあるんだ。今まで言う機会は何度もあったけど、はっきり言えなかった言葉が。
Heisuke went suddenly quiet. His puppy dog eyes quivered, gazing into my soul. His body shifted timidly, like he was still mustering the courage to tell me what he had wanted to say. And then he whispered softly into my ear the words that I had wanted to hear more than anything.
千鶴、俺、お前のことが好きだ。お前以外の女なんて目に入らないぐらい。他のどんな相手とも比べられねえぐらい好きだ。ありがとうな。俺を選んでくれて、こうして一緒に来てくれて。
Hearing the words from his mouth made me feel like I'd been lifted into the sky to rest upon a bed of clouds. He was so thoughtful and sweet. I couldn't help but shed a tear. All those moments I'd spent watching him suffer the torture of bloodlust. Even with the tumult agonizing his body and mind, I wanted him to know how I would have done anything to support him. And now, all of those moments were validated.
おい、千鶴、どうしてまた泣くんだよ。俺泣かせるようなこと言ってねえだろ。
No, sorry, I just... What you just said touched me so. You have no idea how much that means to me. Heisuke inched his fingers to my hair nervously, gently stroking the threads in a playful manner. Then he looked me back in the eye.
お前が喜んでくれるなら、これから先いくらでも言ってやるから。だからもう泣くなよ。な。
「 The next day, we started our goodbyes. Oh my god, how long is this chapter going on for? Time went by in a flash as we spent the day biting each of our friends in the Shinsengumi farewell. My heart grew heavy, realizing there were so many members who left an impression on me that I won't be able to greet, but our departure couldn't be delayed any longer than it already had been.
そんじゃ行くか、千鶴。
Let's go. As we exited the compounds, a full moon dazzled brilliantly in the sky, illuminating the entirety of the path ahead of us. A sign of good fortune, hopefully. Considering Heisuke's condition, it was pressing for us to leave by midnight to cover the most ground, meaning most of the men were likely asleep by then. We had figured this to be the easiest option given that, for all intents and purposes, Heisuke and I essentially no longer existed in the Shinsengumi. It gave us the perfect opportunity to perform a discreet exit, thinking no one would see us off when...
Yo, 二人とも。
My heart skipped a beat again.
遅かったな。待ちわびたぞ。
水臭いですよ、お二人とも。見送りぐらいさせてください。
This is bringing a tear to my eye. Oh god. 土方さん、斉藤さん、島田。
東堂さんも雪村先輩も白状だな。俺たちに挨拶なしで出て行っちまうつもりだったのかよ。
お二人とも今まで本当にお世話になりました。
なんだよみんなして、忙しいんじゃなかったのか。
確かに暇ではない。だが戦友の門出を見送るぐらいはしてもよかろ
う。お二人が仙台から戻ってきた後、会えずじまいでしたからね。無事で本当に何よりでした。そしてお二人ともどうかこれからも無事でいてください。
Same for all of you too.
そうだよ。戦場に残るのはそっちの方なんだからさ。
確かに我々はまだしばらく戦から抜けられそうにありませんね。
だがあんたたちは十分に戦った。敵と己自身ともな。そろそろ戦いを終えてもいい頃だろう。幸せになる。
We will. Thank you for everything.
言われなくても分かってるよ。ありがとな。
Ichigata-san silently observed us banter with his men. He looked more like a chaperone than a participant in the send-off party, offering nothing to say.
それじゃあ行くか。
We waved to our friends, turning our backs when... My ear perked as I heard a message carried by the tender midnight winds. Ever since that fateful evening, when I first encountered the Shinsengumi, my life underwent so much change. It was somewhat of a sinking feeling to think about how this period in my life had flown by me, and that I may never see any of these people ever again. But nah, Heisuke. I loved almost every second of my time with the Shinsengumi, and all of the faces along the way. Memories of our time came flooding back to me, In spite of their reputation, the Shinsengumi navigated pressures felt by the shogunate and other domains with aplomb, working so hard to spread their name. They even overcame internal strife as new members entered the fold. At one point, Heisuke left the Shinsengumi to join the Guardians of the Imperial Tomb. I remember the haunting scene of Heisuke shivering in a pool of blood after the Aburano Koji incident, which led to him drinking the water of life. How he triumphed over the former colonel of the Shinsengumi in a one-on-one duel. It was difficult to believe that all of this and more had occurred in the span of 4.5 years.
俺もだ。あそこで過ごしたことは多分一生忘れねえと思う。
We lived to tell the tale, and at last, we could smile knowing that we withstood all these trials together, walking hand in hand towards our bright future. I met the Shinsengumi, tense and fearful under the sheen of ominous moonlight, but this time, this moonlight was soft, glimmering above us as we waved our friends in the distance goodbye. Summer 1868. Oh god! Oh! The last line by Hijikata! Oh, that got me! Hijikata, you fucking bastard! Oh. Everybody, that was a lie grinning us at the end. Oh my god. Gang, why do you pull this on me? Oh. I think I have to arrange the list again. I have to arrange this list again. I changed it earlier. Like a few days ago. I gotta change the list. Oh god, oh. Shit. Okay. I'm editing it as we speak. Hold on. It's not final. Oh lord, it's not final. But for now, he's being there. I'm putting him there. Jesus Christ. We're not even done yet. But I already put him there. I had to. More. What is our final bit? Give it to me. Give it to me. Give it to me. Final chapter. Ugh. As we traveled a little further, word made its way through the grapevine to us. Following Sanasan's occupation of Sendai, the domain went into chaos before eventually collapsing. Suffering the loss of its key member, the Northern Alliance had no means of recovering, and the country ushered into a new age of government and imperialism. The war reduced the lives of thousands to whispers that vanished into the roar of bombastic cannon fire. Although the country was going to experience a period of tumultuous change, we were safely out of reach within the rural pastures we call home. In the place of my birth, Yukimura village, time ticked slowly over meadows as far as the eye could see. Heisuke's body, too, had experienced so much stress and change. The fresh bodies of water and crisp, clean air did wonders, it seemed, to slowly reverse the effects of his affliction so that he could live comfortably. Over time, his episodes grew further and further apart from each other. And soon, before we knew it, he was able to bask the pleasant rays of sunshine once more. Every now and then, I'd catch him sprawled across the tall grass, napping under the shade of an old tree, sleeping soundly like he hadn't a care in the world. Soon it became a daily ritual, his head resting peacefully on top of my lap as he dozed off. The weather was often so fair and temperate that I often caught myself falling asleep right next to him, leaning back onto the tree trunk as I held him close. This day was another one of those days, the breeze tickling my cheek as I fondly remembered our past. I remember being in the common hall, Kondo-san and Hichikata-san standing in the front, loudly gesticulating. Okita and Saito-san stood just behind them. Oh no. Nagakura and Harada would joke off to the side. And the rest of the men stood proudly around them. And of course, I was slow to open my eyelids, sensing the glint of sunlight between my thinned eyes. My smile carried from my dreams into my waking state, opening my eyes to the serenity around me. Did I fall asleep?
ああ、すっげえ気持ちよさそうに寝てた。だからしばらく寝顔でも眺めてようかなって思ってさ。
Normally, I would have rushed to tidy up my hair, but for some reason, I wasn't bothered by it at all. I turned lightly, nestling more comfortably in his lap, and looked at him as I muttered aloud. I dreamt of the past. I saw Kondo-san, Nichikata-san, and everyone else too. I can't recall. Part of me wants to say I saw you there at first, but somewhere in the middle, you left. I fluttered my hands upwards, as if chasing after the wisp of a dream floating above my head. Heisuke kindly caught my hand, holding it tightly. His hands were so small yet so firm. They were his, and I loved their every touch.
大丈夫。俺はお前のそばにいるよ。日が落ちても、月が昇っても、いつか別れる日が来ても、それでも俺はお前のそばに居続けるから。
Okay. The third Heisuke tier. God fucking damn it, that's the achievement for completing the route. That got me. I'm sorry. I need to. I. I need to. Give me a second. Alright. God. I didn't expect the flashback, the dream. That got me. That really got me. For some reason, I knew that Hiski's route would get me. For some damn reason. But... oh boy, we got 4 routes left. Including the one for Chizuru herself. So next time, on Friday, 3 p.m. EST, we're going back to Kyoto Winds, and we're going to be starting Saito-san's route. Now, I have actually completed his Part 2 route quite recently, so I remember that clear as day, but I don't remember Part 1 at all. Except for maybe a couple of things, but that's what we're doing. After Saito-san, we're going to be doing Harada's, and then I think we're going to be doing Chizuru and leaving Yamazaki for last. And then we get to have some fun and do all of the death scenes, the game overs, and the unrequited love scenes. So, I hope you enjoyed this very late night edition of Hakuoki. I will see you guys later. Please drink water, have a nice day or night, and we'll start Saito-san's route next time. Goodbye.